Hey there! On this episode, we are cooking with shrimp, parsley, garlic, and a spaghetti squash. What do you make of this? A unique take on a spicy shrimp pasta. So, spaghetti squash. This might be a vegetable that, if you're not familiar with, can seem a little weird and a little unusual. But I will be honest with you, it's actually pretty cool as far as vegetables go. On the outside, it looks kind of like a melon, but it's a squash. It's very hard, kind of like a rock, and if you cut it open and look at it while it's raw, it looks pretty much like any other squash. Seeds on the inside, yellow flesh. Something magical happens when you cook it though, and the flesh of a spaghetti squash actually comes apart in shreds that looks just like pasta. Does it taste like pasta? No, it tastes like squash, but it's a really fun and unique way to eat a vegetable, and I'm going to show you how to cook one. So, there's a lot of different advice out there about how to cook a spaghetti squash, and most of them, I'm going to be honest, are going to cost you a finger. So often, people will tell you to take this raw squash and start cutting into it, and if you think about it, it's very wobbly, it's very hard, and you're going to chop off a finger if you try to cut this open before you've actually cooked it. There is an easier, safer way, and it's also a great way to do it the night before and then finish your meal the next day, so lots of prep work you can do ahead of time. All you're going to do is take a paring knife and poke some holes in it, just like you would if you were making a baked potato. Don't stab into your hand, we're trying to avoid that tonight. You don't need a lot of holes, but just enough that as it cooks, it can start to steam. And you'll notice even this paring knife really does kind of stick in there. So imagine going at this with a butcher knife. It's just a disaster waiting to happen. And honestly, I have almost chopped off a finger a few times trying to do it the other way. Learn from my mistakes. Once I discovered this method, I never went back again. So I'm just going to go all around this squash. I'll do a couple in the bottom and a couple in the top just to be safe. And now the squash is ready to cook. All I'm going to do with it is put it in the oven at 375 degrees for an hour. You can use whatever baking sheet or oven-proof dish you've got. After the hour is up, it's going to be a lot softer and a lot safer to cut. I'll show you how to do that next. But like I said, you can do this ahead of time, put the entire squash in the fridge after it's done cooking, and you make your squash when you are ready. Okay, so the squash is done. I've had it sitting for about 15 minutes. I'm just going to let it sit a little bit longer though. I want to make sure it's cool enough to handle because it has been in the oven for quite a while and it can be pretty hot once you go to break it down. So we'll leave him to just sit, and in the meantime, I'm going to do a little bit of prep work for the sauce that we're going to be finishing the squash in. So first thing I'm going to be using is just some parsley. I'm not using a ton of parsley for this because it can be a little bit woody. It's not going to be cooked very well. We're just going to kind of wilt it into the sauce at the end. So what I'm looking for are just the leaves, and I'm going to mince them very fine. So a great tip for getting just the parsley leaves off is to hold it at a bit of an angle along your cutting board, and you're just going to take your knife in at a 45-degree angle and shave off the leaves. Otherwise, I find if you start chopping at the top, they're all different lengths and you get a lot of stem. So if you work at it this way, you get more leaves than stem, and that's what I'm looking for because again, we're going to be wilting this and not cooking it completely like if it was going into a soup or something like that. So the stems can get a little bit chewy and I don't want that. Once you've got it pretty well broken down, you can just scrape the rest with your knife and that should get off most of the leaves. You'll have a little bit that don't want to come along, but you know what? They're just missing out on the party. That's their problem. These are just going to go off to the side. I will scoop anything that I knocked off. And now to mince up this parsley. If you do get a few that came off the long way, you can just pluck them off, but it's a lot easier to do it with your knife than to pluck off one leaf at a time. So I'm going to get everything into a nice pile, and then I'm just going to start running my knife through the pile. And you will do this quite a few times to make sure you can get a really nice chop. So every time you run your knife through, you're just going to gather your pile again. Kind of helps too if you put it in more of a line so that as you run your knife through, you can really get it pushed through. You kind of have to work it a little bit and use your fingers to gather it together as you're cutting. But keep going, don't give up, and they will eventually chop into nice fine pieces. And honestly, the longer you chop it, the easier it gets to chop because the leaves start to kind of stick together. They can be really curly, and that works out in your benefit as you're chopping because they like to hold hands. So it makes it easier the longer you chop. There we go. That's looking pretty good. I'm going to go through this maybe 2 or 3 times more. I'm just not a big fan of parsley stem, and the finer you chop it, the better it is because you don't get any of those surprise stems to bite down on. If you like the parsley stems, hey, you can leave it a little bit bigger. That is your dinner, your sauce, your choice. Like I can see this little stem right here. I'm gonna really get in there and break it down. So what we end up with here is a couple of really good tablespoons of parsley. I'm gonna say that's actually about 1/4 cup. I may not end up using it all, but at least this way I've got enough and I can make that decision while I'm cooking. It's always better to have extra of something like this than to not have enough. The main dish is going to come together very quickly and you don't want to take time out to chop more parsley. So err on the side of caution. That was not a whole head of parsley. I've got lots more in my fridge, so you'll have plenty to move around with. I'm just going to clean up this board a little bit. We'll get ready for the garlic next, and I'm just going to dust the parsley off my fingers as well. I don't want that getting in the way while I'm chopping. Okay, so next thing we're going to be mincing up is 3 cloves of garlic. This is a really garlicky dish, so you can put more if you really like it garlicky. You can put less if you like it mild, but spaghetti squash is a very blank canvas kind of vegetable, and so I find something like a lot of garlic really helps to brighten up the flavor and give it a lot of attitude. So I'm going to just start with this garlic by snipping off the woody ends. I think I can do 2 at once here. Yes, I can. That part is very chewy and you just don't want that in your meal. And then we're going to get the skin off the garlic. So to do that, there's usually one very flat side for the garlic, just the way it grows in a clove. Lay it flat side down, put the flat end of your knife on it, and just give it a good smash until it pops. After that, it's really easy to just separate from the skin. And I'm going to do that 2 more times, getting all of this pesky skin out of the way. That one's gonna be fun to crush, it's a big one. It is so satisfying. It's the weirdest feeling, but it's really fun to do when you're cooking with garlic. All right, we'll get that off and out of the way, and we'll do number 3. There we go. If you've never popped garlic before, I can't explain it, but it's just surprisingly fun. Okay, so to mince up the garlic, now that it's squashed nice and flat, that's actually a little bit less work for you. All you have to do is run your knife along the length of the garlic, so you get little garlic sticks. And I'm just going to save myself some time and do all 3 garlic cloves all at once. So we'll do some sticks out of number 2. We'll do some sticks out of number 3, like that. And then, kind of like we did with the parsley, you're just going to gather all of your sticks up into a nice little bundle, and you're now going to go along the width of the garlic. And that's what's going to give you nice little garlic cubes. I find there's always 1 or 2 little garlic strips that try to run off. Just don't take no for an answer. Get them in there. Make it come along and join the others. There we go. And then I want this to be a very fine mince. So just like we did with the parsley, once again, I'm going to just rake it all up into a nice straight line and run the knife through 1 more time. Maybe even the other way. Garlic is delicious, but for this dish, you do not want big chunks of it in your mouth. You're already gonna have garlic breath with this one. So make sure everybody in the household has a bite, and that way nobody knows anybody has garlic breath. That's the secret to eating garlic. 2 garlics cancel each other out. All right, so that's just going to go into the bowl here. Scrape off any little extra bits that I've got left over. Okay, and then we can get going on this spaghetti squash. So he's nice and cooked, nice and roasted. Very soft. I can actually squish it now with my hands, whereas before I was able to whack on that thing with a knife and nothing happened. So now it's nice and safe. So one note before I cut into the spaghetti squash. I cannot tell you how many recipes I have seen that tell you to cut the squash this way, and that's bad. The reason is the way this spaghetti, we'll call it, forms inside of a spaghetti squash, it doesn't go this way, it actually forms in little circles all along the width of the spaghetti squash. So if you cut it in half the long way, basically you're going to break your circles in half, and now you've only got half of a spaghetti strand. If, however, you cut it the width way of the squash, we'll get the knife right through that guy, then what you have, you might even be able to see it, are little circles of spaghetti squash that run all around the squash. This way nothing is broken and you're going to get really nice long strands of spaghetti, we'll call it. So there are a lot of seeds here in the middle, and you might even be able to see even the seeds start to have a little bit of a spaghetti thing going on. You don't want to eat the seeds though. They can be a little chewy. So I'm just going to try to do this down low so you can see. Go in with the spoon, and any of the really obvious spaghettis, you're just going to scrape those out because those are all the ones that are attached to the seed. If you've ever carved a pumpkin, very similar process. If you've ever hollowed out zucchini, maybe you're making stuffed zucchini, similar thing. We're just scraping out all of those seeds. There we go, and that's just going to go into my garbage bowl. We are not cooking with that. And then, I'll just get those couple extra seeds out. We're going to do the same thing with this guy, so I'll do it one more time here. Once again, try to do it at an angle so you can see the action. Ooh, we've got spaghetti flying. If you really work at it, you can usually get it all out in one good scoop. Yes, it's like a game, I won. Okay, now we have to get the spaghetti out of there. So what I'm going to do is grab a fork, and you're just going to start kind of fluffing it with a fork. And as you will see, the spaghetti actually starts to come out. Like I've said, this is a really fun vegetable. It by no means does it taste like spaghetti. I cannot emphasize that enough. If you're expecting a nice, chewy pasta, that's not what you're going to get. It actually kind of has a little bit of a crunch to it and a little bit of attitude, but because it's long and stringy, you can do a lot of things with it that you can do with a traditional pasta. So you can really treat it in a similar way. You can make a lot of different sauces. I love to just do a marinara sauce down over it as a side dish. But we're actually going to be using this as the main event tonight for dinner and making kind of a quick take on a shrimp scampi. So it's really fun, it's really different. It's a great way to eat your vegetables without feeling like you're eating your vegetables. Okay, so I worked quite a bit of the spaghetti out of this. I'm just going to dump it into a bowl here, and look how spaghetti-y that is. I don't even think that's a word, but you know what? It is now. Spaghetti-y. And I'm just going to keep running my fork through and pulling out that spaghetti. And now, because we cut it the width way, it is so long. Like, look at those long strands of spaghetti. That's really, it just fascinates me. Every time I make one of these, I feel like I did some sort of magic, even though really the squash is the magician here. Okay, I'm just gonna try to scrape out the last of that. So really what you're going to do is just take your fork and just keep on scraping until you've pretty much got nothing left but the hull. And we're getting pretty close there. Once you get to about the last 1/4 inch of flesh, it does turn into more of a standard squash. It's up to you. You can certainly include it in what you're cooking. It doesn't taste bad, but if you really, really like this spaghetti thing that's going on, you can just leave that part behind. I've even been known to just put a little salt and pepper in there and keep scooping out the squash for a snack. It's good stuff. This is a squash I can get behind. Okay, that is looking pretty good. I'm just going to smash that into my garlic bowl. Not garlic bowl, my garbage bowl. That's the garlic bowl. Okay, so once again, we're just going to go in here and just work it around. And if you're really looking to fluff it with the fork, and that's going to be what pulls out the spaghetti without breaking it, because like I had mentioned, that's the one thing you don't want to do is break these beautiful noodles in any way, because the longer and stringier they are, the more fun they are to eat. There we go, we've got most of it out. Wow, that second half came out really easy. There's almost nothing left to scrape out. So I'm just going to keep working at it with the fork. Just give it a little turn every few scrapes or so. And now I'm down to the squash side. So, a couple more. I don't want any squash left behind. There we go, that looks good. Into the garbage bowl with the rest. So at this point, my hands are pretty squashy. So I'm going to actually just get myself washed up. We're going to get this area tidied up, and then I'm going to show you how to put these ingredients together into a really great entree. Okay, so we are ready to put this together into our beautiful shrimp pasta dish. So first thing I'm going to do is go into this pan with quite a lot of olive oil. And this is a preheated pan just to make sure we can cook things very quickly. So I'm going to go in with quite a lot of olive oil for this recipe, but that's because the oil is actually going to be basically the sauce for this. This is a really traditional Mediterranean kind of sauce for a dish like this. Usually it's done with pasta, but instead we're going to be finishing it with spaghetti squash. So to this hot oil, and I'm just going to move the pan in check, Yes, and because my pan was already hot to start with, it's already starting to ripple. So I'm going to start with the garlic and just get that into the pan. That's that sizzle I love to hear. So no garlic left behind, get them all in there. And I'm also going to go in with some crushed red pepper flakes. And I'm going to be pretty generous with this. I'm going to do between 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon of red pepper flakes. It depends on how spicy you like it. I like my food spicy, so I'm going a little extra. And all I'm going to do is just move it all around in this oil. And what we're doing is we're creating a garlic and chili infused oil, and it happens very quickly because everything is already so hot. Do not let your garlic burn. So there we go. Next thing that's going in, watch for splashes, is that shrimp. Straight in. Get it flat, do not move it around. We're gonna go in with a little bit of pepper, just to season the shrimp a little extra. I'm gonna turn down my heat on this pan so the garlic doesn't burn. Pretty generous amount of salt because we're going to be seasoning our sauce. We're also going to be seasoning all of this spaghetti squash. So get in there with it, don't be afraid. And I can see my shrimp tails are already starting to turn a little pink. I'm gonna let it go for just a minute longer. This can be kind of a splashy cooking process, so be careful, stand well back, do not put your face up in it. Let me have another look here. Perfect. I'm going to get these shrimp flipped over because they are already turning brown. That's the beauty of starting with a good hot pan, is things cook so quickly. This is a great speedy meal on a busy day. If you know the busy day is coming up, you can do a little prep work and have your spaghetti squash already cooked. You can even already get it spaghetti-fied and in your fridge the night before. It'll keep just fine, just in a bowl like this. And that way when you get home and you're ready to cook, this part just takes a couple of minutes and it's so quick and easy. Now, if shrimp is not your thing, you can certainly do this with chicken, and if meat is not your thing, you can absolutely do this with tofu as well, and it's delicious no matter how you do it. Just gonna get these shrimp moved around in that oil a little bit. I'm going to check them because all I'm looking for is for the shrimp to get pink and a little bit golden brown. And shrimp actually tell you when they're ready. They'll start to curl up into little circles, and that's how you know that the shrimp is ready to cook. It's kind of cool. All right, those are already looking really good. So I'm going to just move them to the outer edges. They will continue cooking. I don't want them to overcook though, so before they've finished completely, I'm just going to move them. And the next thing that's going in is all of this beautiful squash right in the middle. And because I'm going in with the squash now, it's also going to make sure that the garlic doesn't burn. Burnt garlic is very bitter, so be very careful. If ever you're cooking and it looks like it's getting too hot too fast, you can actually just remove the pan from the heat, hold it off of the heat for a little bit, and that will help to reduce the temperature very quickly. I've had it happen to me a few times, and it's a great tip to save food right before it burns. Okay, so I'm gonna just get this squash kind of evenly spread out over the top for a minute, and that's just because I want to give it a really good season. So, like I had mentioned, squash is squash. It can need a little extra help in the flavor department. This actually does have quite a lot of flavor to it. But because we're cooking with so much of it, it's just nice to have it really well seasoned. So I'm going in very generously with pepper. And I'm going to go in very generously with salt. And this is a lot of squash, by the way. So if you're a little intimidated by the amount of salt going in, just remember that this is probably gonna be a very solid 2 or 3 servings here, maybe even leftovers for the next day. So don't worry too much because that salt is going to be spread out over quite a lot of food. Okay, so I'm just gonna start giving this a little mix so that it can start to absorb all of that beautiful garlic infused oil, and you'll see the chili starting to pick up from the bottom. A lot of nice color happening here. I'm gonna get my heat way up to nice and high again. I turned it down while the shrimp was cooking, but we're ready to get cooking again. That looks so good already. So at this point, because the squash is cooked, the shrimp is now cooked all the way through. You can see how nice and pink they've gotten. All we're doing is just getting everything kind of warmed through. I mean, the squash is already warm too, so it doesn't need a lot. I just want to make sure everything is nice and warm. Everything is nice and coated with that beautiful chili and garlic oil. By the way, you don't have to use spaghetti squash for this. If you just want a good shrimpy, garlicky pasta, you use whatever pasta you like. I just wanted to do the spaghetti squash because it's kind of a fun, different take for a weeknight meal or a weekend meal. Eat it whenever you want. Pasta's pasta, there's no bad time to eat it, even when it's made out of squash. And now It smells like heaven. You can smell the spices and the garlic. The last thing I'm going to do is just finish it with a pretty generous sprinkle of parsley here, and that's just going to freshen it up, brighten up the flavors, and really, you know what? No, I'm gonna use it all. I'm gonna use it all. My heart says yes. It's going in there. It's just gonna make everything taste better. By the time I give this a good mix, all of that parsley is not going to seem like so much parsley after all. And it's just going to give it a really nice, beautiful, bright, almost grassy flavor, but not quite grassy. I don't know, it's such a hard way to describe parsley. It's just got a nice, bright green flavor. If green is a flavor, parsley has that flavor. I'm gonna just get that mixed around. It's going to warm through because the noodles are already hot, the oil was already hot, so it doesn't take much to wilt that parsley down. And just look at all these beautiful colors. You've got the yellow from the squash, the pink from the shrimp, the green from the parsley, and even some little flecks of red from those pepper flakes. And we really do eat with our eyes first. So this is such a beautiful, enticing meal. And I mean, I've never wanted to eat vegetables so bad in my life as when I see this. So this is actually done. So all I'm going to do, I like to serve up my pasta family style. So it is just going into a great big platter here. There we go. Had a couple of little parsleys go overboard, but that's their loss. They don't get to come to the party. And just to make it nice and pretty, I'm going to spread it out on the plate. Whoop. Move some of those shrimp so that they're right on top. There we go. Look how beautiful that meal is. You wouldn't even know that was squash by looking at it. I am so excited to dig into this, and I hope you are too. That is our beautiful, spicy, garlicky shrimp spaghetti. Well, spaghetti squash, ready to go for dinner time. I hope you enjoy this fun new take on a shrimp scampi. I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. As always, this recipe can be found in the description below. Please like and subscribe for more videos. I'm Jessica. Thanks for watching.